Take it away.
Hi, so this is a side project I've had called Recipic. Basic concept is take a picture, get a recipe. If you anybody's watched Silicon Valley, you can probably get the reference. Who am I? I'm a release manager doing information security compliance in Bank of America. Previously, I was also at the bank as a software engineer doing Python and some React in also our FX trading systems, basically post-trade settlement, which is basically if you have like USD EUR trades, we would manage the data behind that after the execution. If you've seen HBO series Industry, would be after everybody clicks the button. It's recorded into basically backend systems, enriched and so forth. I also know Python. I've actually contributed to the C Python branch implementation. So going back to what exactly is Recipic is a side project for when I was bored. I think I actually did more on it re-implementing this than before I did. So I wanted to make an app that would just, given a picture, tells you if the dish has peanuts. And I had to change this concept for the sole reason to taking a picture and getting a recipe, because it's a bad idea. You have false positives in the system. Because then you recommend something and somebody eats it and they feel bad. But if you give a person a recipe, don't think much is a liability, or you can at least inspect the items. And then more about original concept, make people sick, obvious problem, and the retrieving a recipe would be easier, and recipes for allergens. So I think a lot of this presentation is going to be more of the problems I had with reviving an old project, and also my re-implementation of it. The first problem was code signing in Expo. So React Native uses now, at least for a lot of their ergonomics, is built into an app called Expo. Expo is a iOS app, and it basically allows for hot code reloading and other development systems. But if you tried to, but you can't sideload iOS for obvious reasons until maybe they'll make a newer app store when you can actually sideload. But anyways, the other thing is that Expo stops signing basically the Expo app versions. I was still mute. Can you guys hear me still?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, getting that Expo app to run again was proving to be very difficult. And the old libraries, such as React Native Camera, are either dated or or extremely hard to use at all. So I decided to rewrite all of it, which is the obvious answer to everything. So Expo had some new features with React Native, which exposed the GPU to allow for photo recognition. So there's this new feature I'll go to a little bit on, where the GPU is exposed using something called Expo GL. And since an arbitrary GPU would obviously possibly do animation to go faster on the device, but since you have a GPU, you can use a GPU to do inference, or commonly known as photo recognition. So the original system relied on an API call to an external service called Clarify. But now the system, if deployed with the photo recognition model, would not have to do outside API calls other than to get a recipe. Or the recipes could also be on device, and then it would have no external API call. It would just show you a recipe. So there's this system or framework called TensorFlow.js. If you've heard from TensorFlow, TensorFlow is a Python library that allows people to implement machine learning models, specifically deep learning models. TensorFlow.js is a port of that to JavaScript. And ExpoGL, since you can expose the GPU with TensorFlow.js, that means you're running the model on the device. A lot of this project was actually some modifications to with TFJS camera, and you can see the command right there. So that was a lot of the project. I had to just find it. I did do some modifications though. A big one that I did was, so the tick rate or the time it would take to try to recognize what's on the camera was extremely high. I believe it was less than a millisecond. So how I expose the interactivity with the user, it would go so fast, and it didn't really need to go so fast at all. So to improve it, I just added a sleep function for about, I think about 500 milliseconds. So that's an important piece. It's more about TensorFlow.js and React Native. If you want to learn more about it, you go to that URL. And here's more about the ExpoGL view. Now, there's two pros and cons. The pro is no API requests. For obvious reasons, you're still on device. This is also supported on Android. The con is that you have a slower startup and no remote debugging. So the reason why you have to have slower startup is because it's loading the machine learning model into memory and then doing inference. So it has to load. So basically, an iPhone, at least the last 5 versions of it, have basically 6 gigabytes of memory. You're probably loading a model that is around maybe 200, 500 megabytes or less. Don't exactly know the numbers, but you're hitting a few 10 megabytes at least. And that's gonna, in JavaScript and in React Native, you're still going to have this big performance hit. There are ways I could get around it, and in fact, to probably improve the performance, and I'll get to that later. The other thing is remote debugging stopped working, and I read into it. I'm not sure if there's no remote debugging, and I believe, and I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe there's this weird interaction with the GL view, and I think so. So that's another con you have to do. Another issue would be actually getting a recipe database. Elemane has a good API right now. It would get expensive later, but I think that's a good candidate that I could use. Every other API is way too expensive unless I got like actual VC funding, but I don't really want to do that. Well, not at this stage anyways. And should I even use a database? Should I use ChatGPT 3 or 4? They would have a similar API call. I just would have to do a prompt. I do some little prompt engineering where I would say, please return a recipe given the following, and then you submit the prompt to the ChatGPT API. Went over testing. So here's the demo. So here you can see like the interface. It's in the bottom. The bottom has like 3 things it's recognizing. It's recognizing my computer, which shows like the optimization I was talking about before of replacing the model with a different one tailored to food. Then here, see, it recognizes the pizza. It also recognizes looking at a computer and the spatula. It actually gets the spatula because it's on a spatula, I think. And then if I'm tapping pizza now, then I have like a hard-coded load URL to a pizza pizza recipe. So yeah, that's basically how it works so far. I plan on either getting a database or maybe might want to make my own because of the deficiencies, and or use ChatGPT. I seriously want to see which is better, other than Edamain, but or maybe some like regular Googling or search engine results. So if anybody has any questions,